severe flooding. And people are saying things like 30 inches and wave crests of 9 feet and things like that forebode terribly for the future.
Well, as we all know, we're just getting into hurricane season right now, or tropical storm season. And there have always been these big outliers, but if you just look at the meteorological data, the number of large, serious storms that we're having has just been on the rise and on the increase. It's just been on the up and up. And now we see these storms, what is this? The sixth one of the year?
Yeah,
Florence.
Already?
Florence,
Yeah,
they
we're at
like
the
those
Fs,
old-timey names.
you know.
Florence isn't too common a name
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, we're at the Fs.
Yeah, but there's already I think it might be Isaac, is brewing in the
okay.
cradle of hurricanes, as I call it.
So, those who are deniers, keep on denying. It's all right.
That's not, though.
Sure.
Is it, though?
Oh, hey. We're probably already too late, so we may as well go out ignorant.
Oh, you're just the happy, positive guy today. I see. You're just Mr. Light, Mr. Light in life, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just being realistic. I mean, it's too late to build seawalls.
That's true. That's true. That's something we will get into later, and something that we like to discuss. Had we actually decided to devote our resources to bettering the population and protecting all of us, there are things we could do and things we could have done for many years to, I don't know, firstly, to reduce our carbon emissions and our pollution and to stop this from being so severe.
We're not even close to attempting to manage ourselves. We're not even close to committing ourselves to doing something about it. If any of us were asked tomorrow to give up our gas-guzzling automobiles, we would prefer pollution. The Chinese are leading the world in electric cars. But it's going to be too late for them if we don't, If I myself, we've been in this thing like with plastic. And I've been like, really, like, how do you not use plastic? I mean, we have to change our whole way of doing things, like disposing of trash, like wrapping up a sandwich. I mean, we just have to remake whole sections of our society just not to use plastic. And we're not even on the verge of making a decision about that.
No, you see people going away from using plastic straws and yet using everything else made of plastic anyway. Right. So what's the point?
Right. I mean, so you don't use plastic straws and you wrap the sandwich in plastic. I mean, look, we have to make a decision all at once. We're not at a point anymore where we can do things piecemeal. We can't take this step and then next week take that step and then the week after that take the next step. We're past that. Those opportunities were gone long ago. And as I said, we're not even close to making a commitment to even recognizing that we have to do these things, and certainly not to committing ourselves to getting them done.
No, it's not even in our thought process.
It's not no place. The fossil fuel industry and whatnot still runs the country, basically still runs the world, and basically will have its way. We're talking today about mountain pipelines and Dakota pipelines and Bayou pipelines, and I mean, we're still talking all that stuff. And long ago, someone made the statement, which was the absolute truth: that which is in the ground should stay in the ground if we are expecting to survive. And we're not even close to even hearing that
That
statement.
was quite a while ago.
Oh yeah,
That was in
but
the
we don't
70s.
hear that statement.
Actually, one of the first statements I've heard on global warming was before the turn of the 20th century, back in the 1890s, when they had realized that carbon
Right.
did that to the air, that it created this
Right.
greenhouse effect.
It was a big deal in 1912. In this country, where there was publication of what that greenhouse effect was, and a recognition on the part of its citizens and the government that we were in trouble if we kept going the way that we're going. That was in 1912. So here we are in 2018. Having made no progress,
No.
and even stopped progress when we made it. For example, when Jimmy Carter put the solar panels on the roof of the White House to make a statement to America, they were taken down. And when they were reintroduced under Obama, they stayed up for a week. So, no, I'm not being what did you call me? Depressive person today or something like that? I'm just being realistic.
What did I call you? Real happy, fun,
A real happy, fun,
guy.
sunshine guy. I'm just
Real,
being
light bringer. Real, real positive.
Well, see, the light is dark. Yeah, the light that I have to bring is dark.
Okay.
Okay, when you bring knowledge, when you bring enlightenment, you're bringing the light. But if the message is a dark message, then the light itself is dark. And this is in the frame of dark light that we look at this future.
Absolutely. And today is September 12th, and we can turn our eyes now to one of the greater catalysts of darkness, and just an interesting discussion that I think we got to have. I think we have built such a mythos around 9/11. That is, of course, September 11th. If someone doesn't know, of course you do, because it's been talked about endlessly ever since, and has been used for the justification for any number of military and economic actions.
Atrocities as well.
Absolutely so. And economic atrocities, too. Let's
Yes.
not limit atrocity to just military.
And social.
Yeah.
Social. I mean, you may as well tear up the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, but we have something even better now. The Patriot
The
Act.
Patriot Act.
Because you can feel like a patriot if you support it.
Okay.
It's one of those terribly named acts, like the Right to Work Act.
Yeah, okay.
But 9/11, it's been on the internet yesterday and today, as most people have, and just some of the things I see people post, be they my primarily conservative or liberal friends, even some of my lefties, not many of my far lefties, but some of my lib and deeply conservative friends are just really, have enshrined this day as some sort of justification for, America coming together and us, uniting against a common foe. And I think that's a myth. I see that as a myth.
They say that 9/11 brought us together.
Yeah, that's what. That was the idea, that we are brought together by this.
As a nation.
Act.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're stepping forward as a nation. And what does that mean? We're loving and embracing each other? I mean, we're all stepping forward in step, in tune with each other, right? We've ended all of our these little controversies between racists and things like that, disrespect and non-recognition and put-downs and things like that. We've ended all that because we're all Americans stepping forward together.
Bill, did you know racism is no longer a problem in this country?
No, I didn't know that.
It's not.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I brought it up.
Yeah. We're not racist anymore. So,
Because we were brought together by 9/11?
Sure. No, it was
Okay.
because President Obama was elected, and he brought an end to racism. Since we have a black president, obviously African Americans in this country are doing just fine, and there's no need for additional investigation.
Obama, that's the guy who they used to depict with the bone in his nose and big monkey-looking lips and stuff like that. That's the guy who they used to draw the way that they are now drawing Serena Williams.
I was gonna say I saw that cartoon of Serena. It was terrible. It
Okay,
was
well then we're going beyond racism, right? I mean we're not racist anymore.
We're in a
post-racist
where you can do all these
and
things,
that
but they're not
cartoon
racist.
Of Obama and that cartoon of Serena Williams are anomalies, right?
Yep.
And the fact that it gets published in newspapers is also an anomaly too. I mean, this is not no longer a factor.
That was what, the New York Daily News? That was not a small newsletter.
No, it's not a small newspaper. And it was also in other newspapers because it's a service. I think it's Night News or something like that. You know, as a service.
Sky News?
Sky
maybe?
News, is it?
Something like that.
Somebody's. You know. But these are American depictions. These are American feelings. And they were American feelings before 9/11. They're American feelings during Obama, and they're American feelings still today.
Absolutely.
I don't buy that 9/11 brought us together. You might want to sell that to me to make me do your bidding, but I don't feel accepted enough to do your bidding.
Exactly. And my second myth today was that 9/11 changed the U.S. forever. And, you know, it might have been like a hyper magnifying lens. It might have just brought everything to light and brought it into focus for both the people of the U.S. who were just going about their daily lives thinking everything was hunky-dory or fine or just oblivious. But I don't think it changed anything. I just thought it brought the true nature of America to the forefront, into the awareness.
So what does that mean that it changed? I mean, we changed from what to what? We changed from being a belligerent nation to a kind nation, or a kind nation to a belligerent nation, or
that we changed from, you know, taking the high road to living in the real world or something like that.
We were taking the high road.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty funny, isn't it?
That's what got us 9/11, right? That high road.
That's a good one.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, 9/11 was actually brought to us by our friends, wasn't it? Weren't those the people who we supported because we wanted to fight against the Russians, and this was what we got in the way of blowback? Weren't they the people who we gave arms and money and advice to so that they could fight the other people? And, you know, they used to say that, you know, it doesn't make any difference whether or not you learn by reading the Bible or you learn by reading whatever, you know, but once you learn how to read, you can read. You know, and once they get their training and their arms and their money and their insight, and they take a look at you, they can read. So it blows back.
And you know that old poultry industry saying, "Your chickens have come home to roost."
Yeah. Well,
that's what Tyson always says.
Yeah.
Not Mike.
Not Mike, right?
Or the chicken producer.
Mike is doing okay these days.
Yeah, he's okay. He had some problems there for a while.
Oh, for a long while.
But, you know,
Hey.
I don't know. He's finding himself again, and I appreciate it. I don't know. I think he was really, both by Don King and the media and just the sports industry, he was really used for
a
quite
long time,
while.
long before that. I mean, when he was a 15-year-old kid up there in the Catskills, he started being used and shaped into that person who was being used, and he's just probably gotten around to growing into himself.
This dude's in his 40s or 50s, at least, right?
They stunted his growth. So, anyway, we digress. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And this other myth that, you know, Al Qaeda, the Saudi-led group of mostly Saudi Arabians who were conveniently allowed to leave right after the attack and get to their home soil. Well, it was good for them. I didn't want them to suffer any consequences or that was good for them. But they were jealous of our way of life. That they really just wanted to be an American, to live free and brave under the U.S. of A., under those red, white, and blue colors.
Who told us that?
These colors don't run. These colors don't run. They they fly.
Who told
They
us
fly
that?
back to Saudi Arabia.
Bush told us that, right?
What, these colors don't run?
That they were jealous of our way of life, and that's why they did the Twin Towers. They did the Twin Towers for all those geopolitical, strategical reasons that we should really talk about. What happened, immediately following should give you an indication of why it happened in the first place. Because what happened is that it gave us the opportunity to put into effect a neocon plan that we had on the book for a long time, waiting for an opportunity such as that to use it.
Yep.
The fact that we were going down that road and waiting for an opportunity gives us an indication of what kind of things were happening to shake this world up to cause it. And we were a part of its instigation.
We sowed our own demise. And honestly, I'd call it a demise because it really was.
Let me say something. Okay.
You're going to say that we were headed that way for quite some time?
Well, we were. No, but I'm just going to say that, we're talking about this as if what we were doing is in the past. But I'm going to say to you, look, Al Qaeda, isn't that the name of that group that took responsibility or we held responsible for 9/11? Wasn't it Al Qaeda? Mm-hmm. And it was directed by a guy named Osama bin Laden. Was that his name?
Uh-huh.
And Al Qaeda then was the most terrible terrorist group that we could imagine, right?
Sure.
Okay. But Al Qaeda is the group that we are supporting today in Syria against their being defeated by the Syrian government.
And of course, they're very similar, yet more intense and much more public-facing counterpart ISIS. I'll keep calling them ISIS. Okay. I don't care. But
in Idlib, Al Qaeda rules.
Yeah.
And not only in Idlib, but we're paying this monthly stipend of Al Qaeda in Yemen. In other words, what I am saying is that when we talk about blowback and all these little intrigues and all these little stupid things that you do that keeps us going down into this rat hole again and again and again, is that today those people who we call terrorists for attacking us in 9/11, we now call rebels who we support in Syria against a government that has killed and defeated more terrorists than probably anybody else in this world. They are the people who led the fight against terrorists in Syria. Assad is the person who is the biggest fighter against terrorism. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. But we're against the man who is fighting terrorists. We're against the man who is fighting our terrorists. You remember Ashley, what was his name? Ashley, the former defense secretary, Ashford, or whatever his name, Ashley Clark, Ashley, whatever.
Ashley Carter.
Ashton Carter.
Ashton Carter, yeah.
Okay. He told us, but I can't remember who we were fighting then, but we were shipping arms, if you recall, to these terrorists, to these same terrorists. You talked about ISIS. We were shipping arms to them to fight against Assad. And he said that we have to support the terrorists. He said that. And it's a fact that's come true. I mean, so I don't understand. I mean, we stand up and we say, 9/11, these people brought us this terrible harm. 2018, they are what we call our moderate rebels who deserve our support in Syria and in Yemen. The same people.
Absolutely.
In 2015, it was declared in the UN that Idlib was and in 2017 again by all the human rights groups of what was happening in Idlib from Al Qaeda and the war crimes that they were committing there. And yet today, every American newspaper refers to them as moderate rebels who are deserving of our support, and we mourn. We actually mourn in our newspapers and on our commercial television that those people are in for a whipping. We're going to defend them.
Well, certainly. Absolutely right. So,
how backwards?
I mean, it's exactly what happened in Afghanistan in the 80s, the switch, as we go from supporting Al Qaeda to demonizing them, but really we just couldn't use them anymore, or they had served our purposes, and that was enough for us.
We've been in Afghanistan for 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? Does that mean that we're just so poor of an army that we can fight these people for 17 years with all of our so-called superior resources and all of our superior firepower and all of our superior might and all of our superior mind and moral constitution, that in 17 years that we can't win, we can't defeat them, we can't declare it over, that it can drag on and on and on?
Bill, we haven't declared the Korean War over.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Korean police action. We haven't said that was over yet. So look, we got a good 50 years left in Afghanistan.
Okay, I mean, the Taliban are telling us that it will never be over as long as we're there.
Yeah.
That's what they're telling us. We don't hear that, or we don't care. We're making statements that we're going to stay in Syria regardless, and where we're going to stay is going to be where the oil and gas is at, in the northeast.
Well, look, the original justification was to take care of the terrorists, take care of the Taliban and Al Qaeda in Afghanistan was the purported original goal. But it was also to bring that sense of Western sensibility and values and to eliminate this, theocracy run by the Taliban. And we came in and we were as destructive or more destructive than the Taliban was to the social fabric of the country. The Taliban, I mean, at least they were their people. Yeah, that what they did was horrific. And the Afghanistan of the 80s and the 70s and the past was, well, no, much more cosmopolitan, more metropolitan place. And yeah, that was good. And then Al Qaeda or Taliban came in and brought the harsh theocracy and, barred women from voting, from reading, from going to school. And yeah, that's not cool.
Destroyed some wonderful monuments.
Absolutely. And that is not good. I'll just put that forth. That is not a good thing. But we came in and pretty much did worse, but also strengthened their legitimacy in Afghanistan itself because they are defending against the foreign invaders.
Well, but first of all, I mean, and this continues today, and the same question is, what gives us, why do we, Americans, why are we saying today that we're going to stay, for example, in Syria? What gives us we're not invited into another country. What gives us the right to say, we're going to say, and who you invite, Iran, for example, has to go? Where do we get the chutzpah? Let me say this. In Iraq today, there is no reconstruction going on. Water, electricity, etc. The people are wanting. The people are in near rioted sometimes state because they are so depressed by a lack of facility. $30 million a day is being shipped out of that country in the form of oil. That infrastructure has been invested in and rebuilt. You understand what I'm saying? We're taking $30 million of their oil every day, and nothing is going into reconstructing their country.
To what end? What's coming out of it?
Out of what?
That $30 million a day.
No, that's the oil that we sell. We pumped $30 million worth of oil out of Iraq. These private companies that we gave contracts to take $30 million worth of oil out of Iraq every day, and nothing in the selling of their minerals. What's under their ground
They don't get any.
is invested back in that country so that country can improve from its devastated condition.
Speaking about devastated, what was it, the 1.6 million people who were killed in Iraq since the invasion by America? Not to mention the 700,000 who were killed in Afghanistan following the invasion of America.
Well, how could you take their oil and leave them devastated? Where is that chutzpah? Why do we have the right? Why do we Americans feel that we could go into another country, take control of their oil, contract it out, and sell it every day? Where do we get that right? Where do we get the right to go and destroy Libya? Where do we get the right to say, Afghanistan, we're going to stay here. We got what, 15,000 now? 30,000 mercenary, at least.
But also then, I know our new possible strategy in completely privatizing the fighting of the Afghanistan invasion, and that's not to say that it's not that way now. I think it's largely privatized at this point. You got firms like Blackwater, or they're called something else now, but the Betsy DeVos's brother, Eric Prince.
I have to know something from them. Go ahead and talk, please.
Well, while Bill eliminates his phlegm, I'll talk a little bit about Eric Prince and Blackwater and the privatization of war by America. This has been, it's independently based private contractors have been a fact of life and American warfare for quite some time. Don't get it wrong. But at the same time, we can't forget that it's getting a lot worse now, and now there's a new strategy being proposed by Trump, or being agreed to by Trump, or supported by Trump, in that Eric Prince wants to fully privatize the Afghanistan war. Let's call it a war in Afghanistan because that's what it is. We fight the Taliban, and of course the Taliban are fighting for their homes. They fight tooth and nail. And I don't know, from our purported view as saviors, it really wasn't ever what it was, but that's what we said. Like, we have become the foreign insurgent that they want to get out. And the Taliban is garnering that public support. They just don't want foreigners there, and understandably so. Afghanistan's been a battleground for foreign nations throughout known history. But this privatization of war just leads to even greater brutality and unchecked aggression and no redundancies and no transparency. And if there's any main factor of how we like to fight war now and do our foreign policy, it's to reduce any transparency or knowledge of what we're doing or how the orders go. We just saw how it went with the whole drone list when we're looking at President Obama back in 2016, when all the drone reports from The Intercept were coming out, or not reports from them, but their analyses of the drone strikes, that he ordered the strikes, but there were so many levels in between that he could claim non-responsibility because there are all these factors in place and all these automatic redundancies.
Is that Obama?
Yeah. And there
for any individual strike. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it's gotten even worse under Trump, of course. But just this travel towards opaqueness, this desire for non-transparency.
I don't know how they went before that, but the one thing about Obama and Trump, is that they still posture. They posture as the strong man. Obama admitted and strongly admitted that he had a list. Obama strongly admitted that they had a legal ruling that it was okay to kill Americans, with drones, as well as, of course, other people. Obama was actually had stated, numbers of countries that he had drone people in. In some respects, it was a part of his showing off, his pride, his to those people who are the deep establishment. It's acceptance.
And I find it interesting that he initially ran as the seeming anti-establishment candidate, which was interesting because he just came out of nowhere at the one Democratic National Convention. He was the keynote speaker one night and just vaulted into prominence. He was a state senator for a bit, then a U.S. senator for 2 years,
Yeah.
and then president. I'm looking at you, Beto O'Rourke, potential presidential candidate in 2020. I'm calling it now. This meteoric rise of a candidate seemingly from nowhere. And I don't know, not to get off on the subject, but if you look at Beto's surrounding, and if you look at how he's being built up and just celebrified, you can almost see it. You can almost see the Democratic Party artificially building this groundswell of interest around this candidate who has taken millions from pharmaceutical companies and banking and big business and finance.
But there was a time when we used to play politics for the people. If nothing else, at least we could go out and stand in front of them and try to bamboozle the people. Some people got the reputation of being straightforward with the people and became popular for that reason. But then we moved into an era where we thought that we could do all things by using PR techniques, by using media techniques, by using promotional techniques. Crowd control devices, words, hidden persuasions. We don't need to really address the people anymore. And we show that because we don't address the people on anything. And the people say we don't want bad water.
That's too bad because Nestle wants good water and they got dibs. Yeah. Hey, they're paying $200 a year for that well.
Hey.
They're making $2 million from
that's
it.
That's what they're paying there.
So that's quite a return on interest.
Who else are they paying? That we don't. Well, how many political PACs how many ways do they have?
Yeah, but as we know, when you buy a politician, that's the best return on investment you can get by far. Cory Booker.
Amen. And they give them all a chance to play their little roles out. When they had this who was that Kavanaugh hearing? Cory got a chance to play that the guy was a racist, and somebody got a chance to play Roe v. Wade, and somebody else got. But none of them got any dibs in on what the true issues were about. Nobody really talked about things like income inequality and why you're always on the side of the corporation and what our laws really are and the fact that we're going to be dying because of the decisions that you make on EPA and clean air. None of those, which are vital issues. But we all played our little parts,
And we'll get to this idea. I don't know. I don't know if what I'm about to talk about is a smokescreen or not, some kind of, presidential push for Elizabeth Warren, but her introduction of what she calls the Accountable Capitalism Act. One of her measures that, I don't know, I think one of its goals is to save capitalism.
Yeah, exactly.
From itself.
Exactly. But look, you cannot save capital. What we're talking about is tweaking. Capitalism is no longer at a point where we can tweak it. The fact of the matter is that capitalism is destructive not only to our societies and to the earth itself. Capitalism is what allows you to destroy the earth and disallows you to repair it.
And socialism had always been that counterbalance. It had always kept it honest to the degree that it could. But then when you so severely in the 1920s crippled the Socialist Party in America, and then through the 40s and the 50s just obliterated it, stomped it out. And when you see it on the rise in the early 2000s and now, it's honestly pretty impressive and surprising. It had nearly been dead. It had nearly been just this byword of the Red Scare, of communism, of the Red Menace.
You said socialism in the United States, but look, 9/11. 9/11 is when we took out Salvador Allende.
Well, Oh, I was going to say Al Qaeda was socialist.
You know,
No,
Salvador, and we put in who? Pinochet.
well, no. I mean, Pinochet replaced him.
That's who we put in office.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's a
he
really
was a socialist. Salvatore Allende.
there's a really great article written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez of 100 Years of Solitude and something about cholera. Do you remember?
Mm-mm.
Regardless,
Mhm.
really famous South American author
Yeah.
who wrote an article about why Allende was replaced.
Uh-huh.
Great writer, and like he was a Chilean, I believe, and just all the reason it had happened, and the U.S. blockade of Chile and their role in the trucker strike that crippled the trucking industry. And in a country like Chile, it's really important because while it's all mountains, it's like a whole thing of mountains, which is a really interesting geographical choice by whoever determined those boundaries. It's like you got mountain, then you got desert, and then you got coast. It's all this very narrow country. Pretty cool, though.
Mhm. But we attempted a coup there in '70, and the CIA actually published its history on the coup that we supported and I think initiated, but they won't claim initiated. They do admit to supporting, and with presidential support of Richard Nixon in 1973 on 9/11, we caused and you can see the air quotes on this, the president, the duly elected leader of the country to commit suicide, at the approach of.
So, are you saying it wasn't suicide?
I can't buy it. No, I don't buy it.
Well,
Suicide under
you'll
very
have
unusual circumstances.
well, you'll have to buy it because it's capitalism.
Okay.
No, as some of the things that the Allende regime was doing, it was nationalizing industries,
Mhm.
but not through just militant takeover. It was actually buying them back
Yes,
from the
right.
corporations themselves. It wasn't going in there and just declaring sovereignty, which I think it probably could have or should have, but it was actually buying the rights back from these corporations. An interesting possible model for other countries that are looking to nationalize. It doesn't necessarily have to be by force or by the sword. It can just be monetary. It can be.
But those corporations didn't agree. United Fruit.
Well, then we get back to the idea of economic imperialism and bringing that military might to bear for corporate interest, which we have a tendency to do. I'm not saying that's unique to us. I think the British and the Dutch and the Belgish, what's the word? The people of Belgium.
The
Sure.
Boers are about those people who went down there and took over all the land in South Africa that
The
they don't want to
Germans.
get back.
Oh God. I can't try to remember the name of the country that the Germans genocided.
Oh,
Malawi?
oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Really, no
Right.
major European power was exempt
no,
from
no.
any of it.
Imperialism is ugly and imperialistic, whether or not it's by the Roman Empire, the Alexander the Great, or whoever is imperialistic. It's imperialistic.
Yeah,
It's
and
imperialistic.
you see, I mean, it's the dual connection, and I'm sure there are many other connections, but the connection between the economic and the military strategy. When it's the economic strategy, it's capitalism. It's military strategy, it's imperialistic and expansionistic.
Well, it's all imperialistic.
Expansionist.
Yeah.
But because you need markets for your goods, and what better way to secure a market than to secure a market?
You will buy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to get back to that mercantilism stance today under Trump. I mean, we had moved to a world understanding that trade could be good for everybody, that it could be a win-win situation.
It's one of those neoliberal fantasies.
Well, we espoused it.
The
but
idea.
we didn't practice it.
Oh, there's some quote that no two countries with a McDonald's had ever fought a war between each other. That can't still be true,
no,
can
it
it?
can't still be true.
CN's McDonald's just opened its newest location in Pyongyang.
Mm.
That's not true either.
I was going to say, is it? I don't know why they would want one.
I don't know.
They're the happiest people on earth, So,
Who? McDonald's?
no, North Koreans.
I was gonna say. Not McDonald's, because, I mean, they're building kiosks to get rid of workers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Of course, so are Whole Foods and Amazon marketplaces.
Whole Foods don't need workers. They got the prisoners.
And this is coming from a person who, a few weeks ago, traveled to Lancaster and visited the newest Whole Foods location.
That's right.
And just to be honest, their prices aren't great. They have some interesting specialty items, and their fresh food bar is nice.
Mm.
It's fine. It's good popcorn tofu, but I digress. It was really hectic. There were so many people there. It's a really, really popular chain. I mean, admittedly, it was I think it was afternoon and a Sunday, which is where you're going to run into a lot of people anyway. But still, it was packed. But I mean, you saw, like, they try to automate as much as they can. They try to take humans out of the equation as much as possible, and in concert with Amazon Prime. If you got an Amazon Prime account, you can go around, you can look at your phone while you shop, you can see all the values. It'll lead you to a value, and or you can scan it. And really, why bother having people there when you can just look at your phone all the time?
Well, that's the whole idea. Pure capitalism without the serfs. Who needs the serfs? Those who used to be called citizens are referred to now as consumers. That's what we are. And that's all that we are intended to be, except that they misunderstand that if they don't pay us well, we can't purchase well.
Yeah, but they're so greedy, and we're in such a late blood stage of capitalism at this point that they don't really care.
Okay,
That's
well,
just irrelevant to them.
capitalism then will die. It will feed itself to death.
It will consume itself. It
Yeah.
is inherently cannibalistic.
Well, then, and the rest of us will have to find a way of getting along. And I'm glad that we do have some models.
You know what'll help? The Accountable Capitalism Act.
The accountable capitalism.
We won't get to that
This
yet.
is Elizabeth Warren. I have had so many disappointments in her. When she was speaking up against the corporate Wall Street and all that kind of thing, I thought that I had a champion.
And then she shut up when Bernie was in the whole process. She didn't speak a word for
Not
him.
a word.
And
No.
then when Hillary got the nomination, she couldn't shut up.
She was there, boy.
She was.
She was there. She was proving herself to be the establishment foil.
And she's a self-described capitalist. She just is a capitalist.
And she's talking about retuning capitalism, not really changing capitalism.
Mhm.
And I think probably, I don't know a whole lot except what I read on the sheet there, in terms of the elements of her proposal. But each one of those to me is more. I'm not so sure how effective it would be.
I think this would have been great 30 years ago.
Maybe. 30 years ago, we still had the New Deal going. That was wonderful. It was working.
It could have veered us away from this a little bit, maybe, or maybe corporate interests still would have.
We had it going in terms of the best capitalism when we had strong unions, when we were sharing the profits a little bit better. You understand? And when decisions were being made. Okay, mostly by the corporate management, but the worker had some voice, or felt that he had some voice. And there was a bigger share going to the worker than there is today. That was when it was sort of kind of working. That was the time, that's when your parents experienced capitalism,
And even when my grandparents did, when my grandpa was able to get out of the military and to buy a home for a reasonable rate and to work a job 40 years as a machinist and get a retirement pension and pay. And I don't think that should be some wild expectation of capitalism.
That was working.
One should be able to work a reasonable job at a reasonable wage and retire with a reasonable pension and have a reasonable health care. And the word I keep using is reasonable. No one, well, there are a few who are looking for exceeding amounts of wealth, and I think that's problematic in and of itself. But most people just want that reasonable level of money and comfort and security and health care and just recreation
and leisure. Yeah,
that should be one of the facets of the new Bill of Rights.
That's
too,
the
and
new
it
Bill
probably
of Rights
was.
that Roosevelt offered us.
What I'm saying is not some pie in the sky idea. It should be the basis of modern, call it industrial life, because that's where we are. We're not forest dwellers anymore.
No.
Maybe we should be, but it's a different topic.
Yeah. As best said, it was best said at the time by the Romance poets.
Yeah, of course they tended to romanticize it. They never talked about the bug bites.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, in certain respects, I mean, we used to live out there with that stuff, and we were more immune. If you live in the dirt, you get sick less.
I was in Chipotle the other day, and I went to use the bathroom, and this is undoubtedly the fact everywhere, but the soap was antimicrobial. There was antibacterial hand sanitizer. Everything is just inevitably antibacterial now, and I don't think that's great.
No,
it just builds superbugs and also just uses the heck out of antibiotics when you actually might need them.
Yes, exactly. And we have a body that is very good at defending itself if we allow it to develop the proper defenses. But
yeah, and I'm not saying go out and expose your babies to all kind of stimuli, but the fact is that the earlier you expose babies and kids to different kinds of food and different environmental factors,
like with mother's milk.
Yeah,
and
those
which
built-in
we opposed
protections.
in the UN. The United States opposed in the UN.
Yeah, yeah. Like if you let their immune system grow and strengthen on its own, they'll be much better off later in life.
Amen.
So, yeah.
So yes,
shifting gears. What's up with the Poor People's Campaign?
Yeah, I've been trying to read about it, and I can't find anything in the papers, and I've been trying to hear about it, and I can't hear anything on the commercial news outlets. I talked to Ned. I say, Ned, what's going on with the Poor People's Campaign? And he said that Margaret over from the Unitarian Church was in for a training, and when she comes back, that they'll have a schedule of the actions that are going to take place in November. And I said, Ned, you have to come on and talk about this. And so next week, if we can get him on, we can open up this topic and see that there's going to be some actions taking place. What we are recognizing here over and over and over again is that there are stories. There are news items that are important news items about people, about our country, about ourselves, that are just being neglected and denied to us. We don't want those stories to become a part of our narrative. We don't want those stories to become a part of our total perspective. The Poor People's Campaign, the prisoners' strike, those stories don't make it to our airways. And absolutely they should. When they do not, as far as I'm concerned, you meet the original criteria for fake news. And that is in the selection of what is news itself.
And that's a really insidious way of fake news, because it's actually news. It is in fact news, but when you have 1,000 stories to choose from, you can easily choose 100 and shape the narrative in the way you prefer. Next week,
no, they take 3 or 4.
That's even worse.
They don't take out of 100. They don't take 90 or something like that. They take 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. The story of the day is going to be whatever the latest Trump foible is, and that's going to be the top story. And whatever the top tweak is of the week, that's going to be the second top story. And then whoever got indicted today, and whatever the buzzword is from what Woodard or somebody has to say, and that's going to be the top 10 minutes that we're going to spend knocking and debating. about the personality and the effectiveness of an individual who is opposed by the deep state narrative. But we're not going to look at it as a part of the deep state narrative. Yeah. Then we're going to go into what the latest collusion story is. And then we're going to pass over something like, we're going to say, Kim Jong-un farted today. And Putin, I mean, and then we're not going to talk about why we got all these storms. We're not going to talk about what the perspective of global climate means to why we're witnessing what we're witnessing in terms of these fires. The fact that we don't talk about these kids, these juveniles, who are in California fighting fires for $1 an hour.
Yeah, for $1 an hour, they will never see.
Yes.
I'm not saying if they saw it, that would somehow make it better, but that just adds to the horribleness of it, to the irony of what they're doing. They will never see any kind of remuneration for involuntarily placing their lives on the line.
You know something? And this is a perspective about us as a nation, about how we see and use and be. I saw an interview today on Amy Goodman. And she talked with a woman who had been a firefighter in the California system when she was in prison. The interesting thing to me was that she was with a women's unit that went out and did car fires and went out on emergency runs, EMS, that put out people's residence fires. They even responded to guards who had heart attacks and guards' children who had to be extricated from cars after accidents. She had skills. She had skills that she used for the public good the whole time that she was in prison. And when she got out of prison with debt because you owe for your room and board and all the rest of that stuff.
Because that somehow makes sense.
Somehow makes sense. And guess what? She can't get a job as a firefighter. She can't get a job as an EMT because she has a prison record. In other words, while she's in prison, you could use her butt to fight your fires and save your lives. But when she's out of prison and she needs income, you cannot hire her because she was a felon. It was okay to use her while she was a felon, but it's not okay to pay her an adequate wage as a skilled worker. This is our situation. This is our thinking. This is the kind of nation that we are, that we use people and then discard people with such audacity.
Our greatest resource is being sacrificed for nothing.
For nothing.
And of course, our greatest resource being its people.
Yes.
Were we to truly invest in our greatest resource, then perhaps we could truly call ourselves the greatest nation. But I think it's really kind of hyperbole and chutzpah to ever call yourself that in the first place.
I think it's too late.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Of course, which nation is actually great?
Well, but we already blew our whole card.
So, we can come back to these others a little later, but since you were talking about slavery, economic slavery in terms of prison labor, I wanted to speak about Nestle complaining about having to report cases of slavery in Australia. They are trying to craft a new law, and there are differing opinions. Some say it's toothless, some say it's overbearing. Guess who says both?
Nestle.
Right. And Nestle says it's overbearing. And this new law says that if you're a company operating in Australia with an annual turnover of $100 million or more, you would have to annually report on the risks of modern slavery within their business and what you have done to address those risks under the Modern Slavery Bill of 2018, which is the name of the bill in Australia. Nestle is no stranger to using both child, which we're not directly here discussing, and slave labor. Well, firstly, Nestle is a conglomerate that is almost incomparable were there not many other gigantic conglomerates. They have their hands in every pie. They got their fingers in every pot, or fingers in every pie. They got their spoons in every pot. They are everywhere. And I suppose with the chaos of the modern economy and with just the pursuit of absolute profit, of course, we've seen their business practices in America with how they, well, and everywhere in France too and other places, where they just come into a place and buy the water rights and just get all the water out and then leave a community high and dry. There have been any number of allegations of the use of slave labor by Nestle all around the world. They are alleged to use child slaves in cocoa production on the Ivory Coast. The Thai fish industry was complicit in slave labor for use in Fancy Feast. Now, isn't that something? We make food for our four-legged friends, the cat, using the labor of slaves in the Thai fishing industry. That's what their lives are worth. Look, I love cats. I'm a fan. But I don't think they should be fed by using a process of slave labor. I don't think that's necessary. But also, and I think someday, to my chagrin, we should probably talk about the use of slave labor in coffee production in general. This probably be a good topic. But yeah. Nestle has been shown to use slave labor in Brazilian coffee plantations, and this is all since 2010. All these occurrences are since 2010, and they have a long and storied history of using this kind of child and slave labor. And in so many countries, including America, especially America, they don't really even pay taxes.
Nestle is too typical.
You know, one thing they said that really stuck out that should tell you what you need to know about Nestle as a corporation is that their CEO, and I believe it's their current one, said water is not a human right. Bill, if I don't drink water,
you die.
I'm going to die.
Yeah. Cooking it if you don't eat.
How does that not make it a human right?
Of
course, how is food not a human right? How is shelter not a human right?
And clean air. You know, and an earth that doesn't breathe toxins. All along wherever you want to go, where you got all